Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some r/am I the asshole for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading the post, giving you my thoughts and opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Satin Cherry. Am I the asshole for taking my brother-in-law to small claims court for a prank? I recently took my brother-in-law to small claims court over a prank he pulled on me, and now my wife and her family are furious. I need to know if I'm in the wrong here. A few months ago, we were at a family barbecue. I had a few too many beers and fell asleep in a hammock with my shirt off. My brother-in-law, who was completely sober, thought it would be hilarious to fill my belly button with super glue. At some point, I must have touched it because when I woke up, I had glue partially dried in my belly button and on my finger. We tried to remove it, but it was stuck. The glue had adhered to my skin, and when we attempted to peel it off, it caused some tearing around the edges. Unfortunately, my job's insurance has a $1,000 ER copay, but I had no choice. I had to go to the ER. They used a solvent and an ointment to remove the glue, and after everything, I was left with a medical bill of $2,253. I asked my brother-in-law to cover the cost since he caused the situation. He refused. After trying to resolve it privately, I took him to small claims court. And I won. However, he still hasn't paid. This has caused a major rift in my family. My wife is upset, and her family thinks I overreacted. So, am I the asshole for taking him to court over this? Edit, more info and update. The reason my wife was so upset is because her brother was going through a divorce and between jobs. Everyone knew he did it. He even admitted it. He blames his ADHD. I don't want to garnish his pay. The reason I didn't try more to clean the glue off of me was because I have scars in my navel from gallbladder surgery about 3 years ago. My mother-in-law has offered to pay the bill, but she's on a fixed income and I would feel like an ass for taking her money. Of course, I'm the villain, and only my sister-in-law is on speaking terms with me. My wife is barely on my side. It was her that took me to the ER, not thinking it would cost that much. I figure blood is thicker than water. I didn't expect this thread to blow up. A massive pet peeve of mine is when someone tries to use ADHD as an excuse for their actions because it makes other people who try to use ADHD to explain their actions less credible. Because there have been times where I've seen people on Reddit reference their ADHD as a valid excuse for their behavior, but then people in the comments like, oh, a typical person with ADHD, using that as an excuse to get out of everything. But then you got fuckers like this who use ADHD as their goddamn, excuse for, hey, why did you fill my belly button with super glue and cause $2,000 worth of medical damage? It's my ADHD. It's not how that works. Also, how come no one thought just to Google what removes super glue? That's probably my first question, because literally, just use acetone. That'll take care of that shit right away. It's honestly probably the dumbest move right there. Maybe because of the peeling, they didn't want to risk putting acetone on it. But anyways, not the asshole in this situation. You tried being reasonable and they refused. And I've said this a few times on the channel already with posts like this. Pranks are supposed to bewilder and amuse, not cause pain or discomfort. Stepfather throw. Am I the asshole for not making any efforts to get my kids to like my mother's boyfriend? My 36 male father passed away when I was 20, and my mother didn't cope well. She got better with time, but she didn't attempt to pursue another relationship until 15 years later. She has been dating Jim for 2 years. I don't hate Jim, but I don't like him either. He drinks a lot. My mother has had to cancel on us several times because he was drunk. Has made several offensive jokes to my brother, 43 male, that I didn't appreciate, and is overall a pretty unpleasant person to be around. Still, he seems to genuinely love my mother and makes her happy, so my brother and I don't interfere. One problem I do have with the relationship is that my mother has been trying to get my children, 9 male and 5 female, to form a grandparent bond with Jim. He's also been trying to take on a grandfather role, which neither me nor my wife, 34 female, want for the kids. They don't try to push boundaries too much, but we've had some minor arguments in the past. Anyway, my daughter had her first ever dance recital last December. There was a limit of 4 guests per child. The kids usually ask us to invite one of their grandparents to events like this, but my mother was out of town. I didn't even ask her, and my in-laws were busy. Instead, my daughter invited my brother to join me, my wife, and our son. My mother and Jim came to visit us during the weekend, and she saw pictures from the recital for the first time in a photo album. She asked why my brother was there and not her, and I reminded her that she was traveling at the time. She said, "Well, Jim was in town." I'll be honest, we didn't even think about inviting Jim back in December, and neither did my kids. I told my mother that it was my daughter who chose to invite her uncle, and we respected that. Then Jim turned to my daughter and told her that she could invite him next time Grandma wasn't around. My wife chimed in and said she could invite whoever she wanted. After they left, my mother called me. She said she was upset that we weren't making any efforts to welcome Jim into the family, and we were depriving our children of a wonderful grandfather. I told her that we would never force our children to like him or spend time with him if they didn't want to, and that wasn't up for discussion. We ended up having an argument over this before I hung up on her. I spoke with a few family members yesterday who think I'm being too harsh on Jim. So, am I the asshole? So, growing up, I had a complicated relationship with my stepmother. It was definitely all over the place, and there were times where I wasn't quite too fond of having her around. But as I grew and as I got closer and understood the significance of what she was trying to teach me, I actually came to see her as being a second mother. And before I had moved out to Colorado, I told her that. I let her know that everything that she had done for me meant the world to me. And I didn't want her to think I had taken that relationship for granted. My point being is that you can't force a relationship like that onto a child. You can't make them see Jim as being the grandfather. You can't make a stepmother instantly become a mother. That kind of connection and bond has to be earned. It has to grow naturally. It has to be something that is developed there on its own. Because if it's forced, that love is false. They're only doing that out of obligation. But if your kids ever naturally call Jim their grandfather, it would mean 1,000 times more than them being forced to. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that someone who enters your family who then becomes that role through love and admiration means 1,000 times more to both sides of the connection than one that's forced just for simply false flattery. And that's my point that I'm trying to make. So no, OP is not the asshole for not forcing his kids to force the connection and calling Jim grandpa despite the fact that they don't see him as that. It's grandma's boyfriend. Training Carrot 349. Am I the asshole for refusing to give my aunt's dog back? Reddit has deemed this one everyone sucks. Let's see if we agree. So a year ago, my aunt, female 61, decided that she wanted to sell her dog that she'd had for 5 years because it was too much work for her and her husband. Her and her husband are extremely wealthy, with kids who have moved away from home. She doesn't work, so had spent most of her time at home with the dog. About a year before she had decided to sell her dog, our family had lost our beloved fur baby of 15 years due to illness, and were completely heartbroken. So, when we got the news she wanted to sell her dog, we offered to take her in. We had spent time with her dog before and bonded really well, so knew the transition would be easy for her. She said if no one wants to buy her after a few days, she will give her to us for free. Well, we gladly accepted. She gave her to us with the intention of us having her forever, and we thought that was that. We had her for 5 months, and it was amazing. We love her with every ounce of our body. She got spoiled rotten, and it was just so good to have a dog again. During the 5 months, my aunt traveled to Europe and some other countries and was enjoying her luxurious life. About 1 month after she returned from her travels, she started to hint to my mom on the phone that she wanted her back. She eventually full-blown started asking for her back because she missed her. We initially refused and said no and told her it's unfair, but she eventually guilt-tripped me and I agreed to give her back. She ended up taking her back. Our family was absolutely devastated. Well, not even a month later, she tells us she's moving to an apartment and they don't allow dogs, so we can have her back. Now, remember, these people are rich, and if they truly loved the dog, they could have found a place that accepted pets. We agreed, but on the premise that she was not going to ask for her back. And she agreed, and she brought her back to us. Well, we've had our dog for about 6 months nearly, have changed the ownership and chip info into our name and all. Guess who calls last week? My aunt, starting to hint that she's lonely and wants the dog back. My mom gently refused and changed the subject. In the last 24 hours, there has been an all-out argument between us and her accusing us of taking her dog, calling us manipulative and just general nasty stuff. We have refused to give the dog back, and she's more or less saying she won't forgive us, and that will be the end of the relationship. So, am I the asshole for refusing to give her our beautiful dog back? Okay, so I was kind of confused as to why this one got everyone sucks. There was only one comment that actually stated everyone sucks, and it was just under the guise of, you gave her the dog back in the first place and then she gave it back again, so because you two passed the dog back and forth, everyone sucks here, which I can kind of understand, but a majority of the comments are not the asshole. I don't agree with the comment of everyone sucks because when they were first giving the dog back to her, it was under the guise that she was going to keep the dog and she wanted her family pet back because they now had the means to actually care for it. While yes, it is not good for the dog for them to be bounced back and forth between households, it was still her dog, and the dog was more familiar with them seeing as the dog had lived with her for almost 5 years. So on the first go of it, I do understand and sympathize why they would give the dog back in this case. On the second time, I also 100% understand and agree with them not giving the dog back for the second time, because they've already played this song and dance and it ended the same way, and they've already transferred ownership in its entirety. She agreed to the terms that there wouldn't be any takesies backsies, and that's it. And now she's upset because she wants to takesies backsies and doesn't realize that, no, they're not just going to keep letting the dog go from family to family and deal with that much stress. I mean, you can't just keep doing that to a dog. It's not healthy for him. And not to mention, her initial response was to sell the dog. She wanted profit from her dog. And when there were no buyers, she then just decided, okay, fine, I'll give him up for free. Like, what would have happened if someone bought her dog? Like, would she have been like, hey, I want to buy my dog back from you? Like, what was going to be the end result of that there? But in the end, I definitely do not agree with the everyone sucks here rating, and firmly agree with the not the asshole rating. What do you think though? Do you think that because they did initially give the dog back the first time that does put them into the everyone sucks here category? Or do you think that the first time was at least understandable and partially justified? I'd be curious to hear how you all think. Muchbed2383. Am I the asshole for ignoring my wife for throwing away my late wife's videotapes? I'm writing this because I don't know what to do. I have a daughter with my late wife and her name is Eleanor. Her birthday is coming up in 2 weeks and she's turning 18. Background: me and my late wife, Chloe, had been dating since college. We got older and ended up getting married, and after our wedding, she shared news to me that she was pregnant, and I was excited that we were expecting our first child. Since it was our first child, we bought a video camera and made little tapes and snippets of her whole pregnancy. Wholesome things such as us just joking around or having lunch or talking to our unborn child through the camera. We made a promise to only show Eleanor the tapes until her 18th birthday. Fast forward 2 years after her birth, Chloe passed away due to a drunk driver crashing into her car as she was coming home from her mother's house. I was devastated of her passing and went into a deep depression and having to raise our 2-year-old daughter by myself. My friends tried to get me to go out again and start back dating, but every time I did, I felt like I was betraying her. Years later, when Eleanor was 13, I met Wendy. We met at a gathering for my sister's birthday and we instantly hit it off. She didn't mind that I had a daughter because she had 2 kids herself and just went through a divorce. 2 years after we got married, now back to the present, Eleanor's 18th birthday is coming up and I kept all the tapes for me to show her. Mind you, her mother died when she was just 2, so Eleanor doesn't remember her touch or her voice. I was excited to show her the tapes, and a week ago I was talking to Wendy about it and I noticed her expression going from happy to looking a bit uncomfortable. Wendy would always get uncomfortable when I talk about my late wife. I don't say things like, why can't you be like Chloe, or Chloe was only supposed to be my first love. But I talk about her in a way to give my daughter a mental picture of how her mother was like. Wendy always talked to me about Chloe and how it made her sad that she can never be like her. Chloe was a model, then started working on her fashion career. And don't get me wrong, she was a really beautiful woman. While Wendy had 2 kids in college and not in the best shape. Her words. I love both women, how they are, and I've never had preferences, but I feel like Wendy is gaining some jealousy towards Chloe. I told Wendy that I love her just the way she was, and she broke down crying. The next day after that incident, she came up to me and apologized for the way she acted last night. I told her it was okay, and it's good that she felt comfortable to share her feelings, and I gave her a tight hug and kissed her on the forehead. She asked me to see where the tapes were at, and I showed her the box of videotapes of my late wife in my closet. Things were going fine until yesterday morning. I was looking for the tapes because I wanted to put them in a prettier box for my daughter, and when I went to go find them, the box wasn't in my closet. I looked everywhere to the point I walked downstairs to see my wife laying on the couch watching TV. I asked her about the box, and she told me she threw it away with a neutral expression. My heart dropped, and I asked her, what did she mean? And she told me that I talk about her too much and that I need to move on with my life, so she threw them away as a head start. I was fuming with anger because not only she threw away what I had left of her, she threw away my daughter's big surprise. We quickly got into an argument and she noticed how angry I was, so she started apologizing. It got to the point I started crying and locked myself in our bedroom. It's the morning, and I'm writing this in my office, going through my computer, finding old files or any type of video of my late wife to give it to my daughter because sometimes my daughter still cries that she never got to meet her mother, and I really thought it would bring her closer to her. I've been ignoring my wife for the past day, and she's been texting me nonstop about how sorry she is, but I really just can't look at her right now. It's getting to the point our mutual friends are texting me to accept her apology and get over it since Chloe died over 10 years ago. But I'm trying to ignore them all because they never had someone so close to them die. I'm working on finding these files and I'm starting to think I was overreacting. I don't know what to do and I really need help. I never say this. I normally try to make a point of trying to work things out and try to go and actually communicate with one another. But at this point in time, I think OP should just fucking divorce her. She knew how much those tapes meant, what their purpose was for, what it was supposed to be for OP's daughter. And she decided that she should throw them away to get a head start from moving on. She took something away from both OP and his daughter that can never be given back or never be given in the first place. Memories that his daughter would have never had, that she could have had, are now forever gone because she thought she knew best to throw them away as a fucking head start. Even if she tried to pull them out of the trash as a way to apologize, there is still no going back from the fact that you now know that your significant other is willing to rob your child of an extremely important moment that you waited 18 years to give her. There is no recovering and no going back from that. It was premeditated, and I would honestly say it was fucking evil. And I honestly think OP should just leave her. Throwaway 916415. Would I be the asshole if I sent an email to the birthday girl's mom explaining why my daughter left the party? Reddit has deemed this person not the asshole. Let's find out why. My 43 female daughter Annie, 9 female, was invited to a party at a bowling alley to celebrate a classmate's birthday. Only girls were invited to the party, and about 21, and I think it might have only been girls, 17, were in attendance. We were about 5 minutes late to the party and arrived at the same time as another classmate, Betty. Due to the long lines, it took Annie and Betty about 10 minutes to get their shoes and to walk over to the lanes. The hostess had reserved 3 lanes next to each other, as typical with bowling alleys. There was 2 curved benches for seating for 4 lanes. When we arrived at the lanes, the other girls' names were programmed in the 2 lanes and an adult male was programming his name in the 3rd lane. Annie went to the area and was directed to the 3rd lane. I said hi to a few of the other parents and saw that Annie left the area. I asked her where she was going and she said she was told to go get a blue ball because it was lighter. I realized that the ball was 14 pounds, so I told her I'll go look for a lighter ball for her. When I came back with a ball, one of the parents asked if I was bowling, and I said I was just getting a lighter ball for Annie. As I gave the ball to Annie, I heard the dad of one of the other girls say to Betty that her name is now on lane 2, as the birthday girl's mom, the hostess, Dana, came by. I asked Dana if Annie can also be added to lane 1 or 2, and was told that Annie is in lane 3. I was surprised and walked over to lane 3 to see that Annie was added to lane 3, and the only other player on lane 3 that Annie was playing with was the adult male, who we didn't know, with a bunch of other players named Kid 1, Kid 2, and Kid 3. I then saw Annie sitting by herself. I asked her if she wanted to go to the other bench to join her friends, but she said she was on lane 3 and was waiting for her turn to bowl, though the adult male was bowling for the other kids. I let her be and went back to talk to some of the parents, but 5 minutes later, realized she was still sitting alone on the bench rather than joining her classmates on the other bench for lane 1 and lane 2. I walked over and asked her again why she didn't join the other classmates, and she said that she felt left out. So I asked her if she wanted to go. She said she did because she didn't want to play with the adult male stranger. So Annie and I walked out. As we went out the door, her friends asked her why she was leaving, and she said she didn't want to bowl with the male stranger. The other parents asked me why we were leaving, and I said that Annie was playing on a separate lane by herself. A few parents offered to have them take turns in lanes 1 and 2, but by that time, Annie had walked out. I then took her out for ice cream. After we left, I realized I could have asked Diane to divide the girls evenly into 3 lanes, but by that point, we had already left. I'm really upset how the hostess thought it was okay to isolate Annie, and am glad I didn't just drop her off and leave. Would I be the asshole if I sent the hostess an email explaining why we left early and how the setup was exclusionary, and that it was improper to have my daughter bowl with an adult male stranger instead of her classmates? So, okay, first things first, the guy bowling, like, what the hell, dude? Like, he sees that there's a little girl waiting and, like, there's a bunch of her friends nearby, so he takes up a lane that was already reserved, no one kicked him off, and he sets up 4 people to play as himself. He has himself, Kid 1, Kid 2, and Kid 3, and plays all the frames for all the people while this girl is just waiting? Like, dude, what the hell? It's also a damn shame that none of the other parents or the hostess herself actually went to fight for lane 3, and the fact that they did actually reserve that and then kicked one single child to that lane. Like, come on, like they should have realized what was going on when she sent her off to one single lane on her own and there was no one else there. That kinda sucks. Well, not kind of, that does suck. OP leaving already sent enough of a message. My recommendation is, if OP does decide to send an email, is not for it to be aggressive, not for it to be confrontational, but simply gentle but informative. The last thing you want to do is isolate your daughter from her friends, but you also want to stand up for your daughter, and that's why the tone is extremely important. I do think, though, that an argument could be made for OP at least having some blame here. After all, she did leave her daughter alone with a male stranger who she had no idea who that was, didn't even introduce herself or find out who the guy that her daughter was bowling with. I mean, if I had to guess, the strange man was probably just a family friend who was bowling in place of the placeholder kids who hadn't arrived yet, being Kid 1, Kid 2, Kid 3. And Betty, the person who arrived barely before OP but still late, was able to get a slot in lane 2 while, her daughter, who was a little bit behind, got the first slot in lane 3. I'm just trying to make as much sense as I possibly can of the situation because it's definitely messy, and I'd be very curious to hear what you all think on it, because I could certainly see arguments for either side. And the more that I think about it, the less I'm able to actually firmly place who's at fault in this situation. So I'd be really curious to hear what you all think on this, because I'm certainly all over the place on it. Because the hostess did just send a child to lane 3 on her own while all the other kids were essentially hanging out together, so there was already the isolating moment of that. Granted, she was juggling a lot of kids at once at a bowling alley, and that cannot be fun at all. And there's just a lot of moving parts going on. And at the same time, the mother did leave her daughter alone with a male stranger. She did stay to keep an eye on her daughter and was able to get her out of a situation she was uncomfortable in, but also didn't confront or attempt to remedy the situation at play or find any kind of solution that was amicable for all parties, just simply leaving with her daughter and calling it good, and wanting to send an email later on. And it's because of those reasons that I find this to be complicated, so I'd really be curious to hear what you all think. Plain small pineapple. Am I the asshole? Opened a jar of sauce to use some and put the rest in the fridge. Reddit has deemed this person the asshole. So, to preface this, my 18 male, mom, 47 female, usually has no issue with opening jars of red sauce, using a little, then putting them in the fridge and using them for a meal later on. My dad does it, I do it, she does it, my grandma does it. She has never expressed a problem with it before. This is important. It is also important to note I am autistic. So tonight, I opened a jar of Alfredo sauce. I asked my brother, 12 male, to help with opening the jar, and my mom starts freaking out and saying not to open it. But by the time she said anything, it was already open. So I used the sauce in my pasta and she starts complaining that it can't be used for a meal now. Thankfully, I had the self-control not to say my immediate response out loud, and instead said, "Yes, it can. It's not like I stuck my fingers in the jar." And now she's moping on her phone and acting like I've committed a federal offense. Did I do something wrong? Am I the asshole or is this stupid? Edit to add, I closed the jar and put it back when I was done. Because it's Alfredo, once it's open, you're supposed to fridge. She's never had a problem with this before, even with other cream-based sauces. She never said I couldn't open the Alfredo until it was already open. Edit to add, there was 2 jars. I opened and used only one. So the reason why I think OP's the asshole here is because of the reaction. Like, it sounds like the household has some norms and OP was following by those norms that were previously established, but the problem comes from the fact that, OP's mother told them, don't use that jar, because chances are OP's mother probably had plans for it. OP, even after opening the jar, which if he did open it and the mother had plans, he could have just simply put it in the fridge, decided to still use it despite his mother's protests and snapped back with, yes it can, it's not like I stuck my fingers in it. And that's where I think the problem really boils down to, is because it's clear your mother had plans for the jar, she tried to express that she had those plans, and even after you opened it, you still went and used it. OP in this instance had the opportunity to find out why using the sauce was not okay. It could have very well been that your mother was planning on cooking something that required 2 jars of sauce. Now that is an ungodly amount of sauce, but still. That could have been within the plans and why she was trying to prevent you from using it. And instead of trying to find out why she was telling you to stop and don't use it, you went right ahead and finished what you were doing, and made no attempt to try to understand where your mother was coming from. And I think what's even worse is that instead of trying to talk to your mother and find out why she didn't want you to use the sauce, you turned around and went right to Reddit. I think it's also important just to mention the fact that all households have different rules, and in this instance, I do appreciate OP for establishing the rules of the household, that it's pretty common for people just to kind of use whatever they have access to for food and have open reins on it. But in this instance, OP's mother did try to firmly state that the sauce was not to be used, and OP used it anyways. I think this post is just a good example of why communication is key. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Press and Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those 2 are my personal favorites right now.